everyone, my name is Leonie and welcome to another video. NaNoWriMo 2016 has started, so I thought I would make a video talking about some writing tips. I'm not going to talk about all those general writing tips that you can find all over the internet, but instead I wanted to make a video talking about some unique writing tips that I found on the internet or that I've come up with myself that I use and that I want to share because they really help me, so maybe they might help you as well. The first tip that I want to give is notes. Notes, notes, notes. But Leonie, how could I carry a notebook with me everywhere? This also counts as a notebook. I know that keeping notes is a very well-known and general tip, but I have some tips on types of notes that you can make that I find very helpful. So apart from obviously having a note for each story idea, I would really suggest having a note for random story ideas, because very often I just come up with a random idea that doesn't specifically fit in with any one of the story ideas that I'm currently working with, so that's why I have a separate note where it's literally just called random ideas, and every time that I'm stuck in the current story that I'm working on, I can just go through this list of random ideas, and usually there's something in there that I can use. Another list that I would suggest you make is a list of names. Whenever you hear a pretty name or just a name that sounds cool to you, write it down somewhere, because I know that coming up with names can be really hard. So if you just have a list of names that you've already decided you like, it's always great to refer to. And another list that is very helpful is to make a list of nice words. Whenever I hear someone use a pretty word, I write it down to kind of remember that that word exists. And this list is also mostly filled with synonyms for words that I overuse. Tip 2 that I have is the quote trick. It also involves taking notes. I'm pretty sure a lot of you already keep track of quotes. Whenever you come up with a quote in your head, you write it down. Whenever you hear someone else say something nice, you write it down. But the quote trick is that every time you come up with one of these quotes, you assign it to one of the story ideas that you already have in your head. So if you hear a very beautiful descriptive quote, think to yourself, hey, this is a quote that could be said in story A, or something funny that someone says. You're like, hey, this is a quote that could be used in story B. So now what you end up with is you have a list of categorized quotes for each story. And what I always notice is by doing this, you realize that each story has its own type of quotes. So for example, all the quotes that you've assigned for story A are very dark and mysterious, whereas all the quotes that you've assigned to story B are all very quirky and colorful. And by doing this, you have basically unconsciously established the tone of writing that really works with each story. Sometimes it can be hard to kind of think about what tone of voice you need to write in for your story, but by doing this quote trick, you can basically instantly see the type of tone that works for your story. Tip 3 is combining. Something that I always struggle with when I'm kind of stuck in my story and I don't really know what to do with certain aspects of my story. The first thing that I think most people refer to is to make it more complex. Of course, another thing that you can do if something's not working is to just completely scratch it from the story. But one thing that at least I always forget is always an option is to combine two things. For example, in my current NaNoWriMo story, I had two separate characters that both had important roles in the story, but I had no idea what they were about. They were super bland. I had no idea what to do with them. So at first I was struggling with trying to make them more complex, but that just didn't work. And I ended up combining the two characters and make them into one character. And not only did I now have one less character to worry about, this new character just became instantly more interesting because he now had two roles instead of one. So don't forget that combining is also an option. The next tip is for finding music. If you're someone that likes to write while listening to music, it's always important to, of course, find music that fits with your story or fits with your characters. Sometimes it can be hard to know where to look. What I've noticed is that a lot of great writing songs are actually movie soundtracks. You know, pretty much each big blockbuster movie also has a movie soundtracks with a bunch of songs. These songs are already meant to be, you know, for action scenes or for a general storyline or for a specific character. So these songs are usually great for writing because they are already made to be for a work of fiction. For example, for my current NaNoWriMo story, I listened to a lot of the Suicide Squad soundtrack. They have really good, you know, squad music. The next tip is for coming up with character personalities. This is something I always struggle with. I come up with a character role, like, oh, this character is gonna be the love interest, or hey, this character is gonna be a prince, and then I kind of know their role in the story, but I have no idea what kind of personality I should give them. And I know a common thing for coming up with your character personality is to do personality quizzes with them. So you just answer a bunch of questions and then a result rolls out of that. But what I find very helpful is to basically kind of cheat and just not do the test, but just immediately go to the possible results and then just pick one. Read all the possible results and then just pick one that I feel would be interesting for this character, and then I just read the character page for that personality type, and you instantly know a lot about your character. The next tip that I have is bracketing. For example, if you're writing a dialogue and you reach a point where you're like, this is the moment character A says something really badass, but you don't really know what they should say, just bracket, say something badass. You can do that. I know Leigh Bardugo once said in an interview that she does this a lot, like there would be just brackets like, say something deep here, or say something cool here. And if Leigh Bardugo does it, so can you. And the last tip is one that I found on the internet, but I think they are very, very helpful tips, and that is for when you're stuck and you don't know what's gonna happen next. So the first answer to this is a tip that Marissa Meyer gave, and that is, if you don't know what will happen next, think of the very worst thing that could happen at that moment and then let that happen. I think that is a super helpful tip. And the other answer to the question, what will happen next, is one that is from Pixar writing tips, and that is to make a list of all the things that wouldn't happen next, and you will find out that usually the thing that will happen next is actually in that list, and by doing this you also keep your story unpredictable. And those were all my writing tips that I personally use a lot. I hope they were at least slightly helpful to you. Let me know how your NaNoWriMo is doing if you're participating, and I will see you soon in another video. Goodbye!